So I'm thrilled to be here. I'm sad that Ray is not here, which is the reason that I'm up here in front of you right now. But thrilled to be able to share with you sort of some of my insights into Steve Arnold, AKA Dad, from the family perspective. And those of you that I know best are probably the people who were in his lab when I was a child, because I was fortunate enough to spend most of my childhood summers at Snake Camp, and so overlapped with a number of you. But I chose this title, which, by the way, is an African proverb, because one of the things that I have noticed about herpetologists is that they seem to fall into two categories. There are herpetologists who went into biology because they loved herps, and then there are people who just happen to work on herps, right? And so my dad is absolutely in the former category. So I thought I would share some of the insights into not only that he has always been a herpetologist at heart, and will always be a herpetologist at heart, but also just that the person, I firmly believe that the person that you have experienced as Steve Arnold is also the person that I've experienced as Steve Arnold, because he is so unchangeable and so centered as a human being that throughout his life there's constancies in terms of who he is as a person that I think we have all shared. And so you'll see this now from the window of family member and child. So here's just, because it's like, oh, it's so cute. Picture of him when he was a little kid. And I have to say, like, you know, one of the things as an adult that I was absolutely struck by was, like, how did this happen? You know, he would tell me stories of his childhood, and I knew his parents, and I was like, how in the heck did you end up being a herpetologist, being born to these two folks who I knew them as sort of home buddies. Their affinity for nature extended as far as loving to garden, but not beyond the perimeter of their well-manicured garden. So here you see little Steve down in the bottom with a cute hat on, in front of his mom, Liz, and his dad, Dick, on the side. And if you've ever heard Steve say, we all have a little bit of Dick in us, he's referring to Daddy Dick there, who was well known in our family as being obsessive compulsive. We both, like, when we learned about obsessive compulsiveness, called each other and we're like, oh, that's him. And so it was like, how did, you know, I just was amazed that they even let him bring all of these snakes and lizards into their house, and we're cool with that. And so it was always this sort of paradox to me, and it wasn't until I was an adult and I actually said, you know, like, hey, you know, how'd this come about that you actually were like this born herpetologist and naturalist with two parents who, other than, so let me just say, what he did get from them, totally his sense of humor. So that sense of humor we call in our family the Arnold sense of humor, or the Arnoldian sense of humor. And it wasn't actually just from his dad's side. They both had it. So late in my grandmother's life, I would sit and chat with her, and I'd just like constantly amazed by how it was amazing that these two people who came from very different backgrounds came together over a shared sense of humor, and then generated a whole series of progeny who share that sense of humor as well. So to me, the secret to like how did Steve become this like incredible naturalist is, the answer to that is the man who's in the middle there, who's Jess Arnold, who looks not a whit like someone that you would expect would, whoa, don't know what's going on there, would influence him, but you can see it a little better in this next picture. So Jess, even though in his day job was a jeweler, was a birder. He went on trips in the 20s and 30s down to Mexico and collected birds for the San Diego Zoo. And when he approached retirement, bought land out in northeastern Orange County, and completely cleared it himself, built his own house. And that was, if you've ever heard my dad refer to the ranch, that's where he spent his idyllic childhood, free-ranging and collecting various different herbs. So this is a picture of Jess with my dad, and showing him a cow, which obviously didn't take. And you can see here too, I thought this picture was hysterical because when I first looked at it, I was like, so clearly he was not born to work on mammals, right? Because look, he's like, you know, not at all happy to be sitting there. But the more I looked at it, I was like, I can hear young Steve, besides being irritated that he had to wear fancy clothes because he was born to wear jeans and a t-shirt, that he's sitting there going, in his head, he's going, you know, when you said I was going to get to meet the Easter Bunny, I thought it was going to be a real rabbit, right? And he's disappointed that it's some person dressed up as a rabbit. So here's the budding herpetologist. So my dad tells me this was on the ranch. He says he thinks this is actually the first snake he ever caught. And it's a gopher snake, in case you're wondering. And here's a picture from a little bit later, and you can see like just the that is quintessential Steve, right? That picture, because look at what he has in his hand. It's his precious specimen of desert iguana there that one of his classmates had brought back from Palm Springs for him. So this is a little bit later. For those of you who, so Dick Sage is not with us today, right? But maybe online? This is you with Dick Sage. And also Tim Clark. Those of you who, so Tim Clark was his collecting buddy from his teenage years, and then reappeared in all of our lives as Officer Jarvis. If any of you heard the Officer Jarvis stories, that's Tim Clark. This was heading off onto a collecting trip with Dick Sage. This apparently, according to my mom, is a picture of him from when he started at the University of Michigan as a graduate student. Had hair. Check it out. This is another one that my mom provided. I'm thinking Costa Rica.
Costa Rica.
Costa Rica. And Harold Kupowitz, yeah. Another early Costa Rica picture. And Steve, are you in this one?
Yeah.
Tilly? People recognize anybody here?
So there's Steve Tilley.
Yeah. And
standing next to Doug Fatuma. Oh, yeah. And that's Rob Caldwell, right behind
oh, yeah,
the
here.
camera.
Somebody needs a minute.
Yeah, I'm just trying to point here. So Doug Fatuma,
Doug
yes.
Fatuma,
Rob Caldwell.
Caldwell, next guy over. I don't know.
Where's Steve?
The next guy standing.
He's on the other side of Doug Fatuma.
Oh, over here?
No,
No, I meant Steve Tilley. I know which one is my dad. The dad I recognize. Anyway, great picture. You guys recognize yourselves. Okay, so this is for me where it starts. So some of you were asking me like, hey, how's your mom doing? My mom is great. She actually retired a couple years ago. Dad was the last holdout of my four parents to retire. While the marriage didn't last for super long, wonderful things came out of it, and so we're thrilled that it happened. And I think this is at Mountain Lake, is that right?
Mountain Lake.
Mountain Lake, which Butch later was director of. And not too long thereafter, my dad met the love of his life, Lynn, who is with us today. And I have to say, it gives me inordinate pleasure every time I see the two of you guys together because you're an amazing team. And, as a child, I didn't realize the true magic of that you guys worked together and then came home and actually enjoyed being in each other's company. And you're just a magical, great marriage, great people. I often say to people, if I got stuck on a deserted island and could only choose a couple people to be with, the two of you guys would be on my list. So anyway, early picture of Dad with Lynn. Early picture, I believe this is a very early Eagle Lake picture with me, not Laura. By the way, my twin also says she wishes she was here. The two of us with Dad and Lynn. This is at what we called the museum, which was my grandparents' house, which gives you a sense of how neat and organized it was and how not my dad it was. Okay, so I love this, the early Eagle Lake picture. I believe this is Fred. Is Fred here? Yeah, is that you? And for those of you who are part of this era, the magical yellow table. Remember that yellow table where like so much field work was done? And for us, it was always about those little snap containers that the snake barf was in. Chuck at, I can't even remember the name of this, but this is the Susanville lab, right? And I think Tim Clark as well, right? Yeah. It meant nothing to me as a non-biologist. Additional early Eagle Lake pictures. Obviously my pictures are somewhat biased towards my interaction with them. So I actually went to the University of Chicago and got my undergraduate degree there. So this is me graduating, and Dad and Lynn participated in the ceremony as faculty, which was amazing. And you can sort of see my husband actually over in the corner there. Anne, who was, so I have to say, like, we loved all of your students, but particularly Anne. I think Anne was one of the first, like, female students that we interacted with a lot, and she's sort of similar in age to my sister and I. Cute picture of Dad and Lynn shortly after they moved into what we called the Pond House, or Casa Paradiso, as I like to call it, which is where they now live. I think this picture is from, you can correct me if not, so also my stepfather, Al, sends his regards as well. I believe this was like right around the last closeout of Eagle Lake and the transition of Eagle Lake from you to Anne, correct? And also great example of, this is another thing from my childhood of like, I just took it for granted that when people got divorced that they continued to be friends with their exes because my parents all spent time together even without the kids and got along with each other. But I have to say as an adult, I look at it, I'm like, you guys are amazing. And Anne actually, I believe, postdoced with Al, right? For those of you who remember Betty the Boa, remember Betty the Boa who lived, she made a big impression on me as a small child. This is right before when Dad was closing down his lab, and she actually got moved to a local herpetologist who does shows for kids. This is your undergraduate advisor?
This is Robert Stebbins, at
Yeah.
age 97.
Yeah. It's who came to visit the Pond House. And I found this picture in your archives. I love that you're showing him a snake. I thought that was really sweet. And if I recall, the story behind this visit was that he looked around the house and said, well, isn't this a little slice of paradise? Which is, we all agree, it absolutely is. So for me, I actually trained as a chemist. And one of the great disappointments of my life as a chemist, which I was a chemistry professor for 10 years before switching to public health, was that I didn't get to do field work, which I was like, man, that totally sucks. And also, I really love people. And so it was sort of this tension of like, I loved chemistry, but always sort of felt like it wasn't quite right for me. So when I switched to working on public health, and started doing field work actually with someone who also knows my dad, Tom Smith, in Central Africa, I said to my dad, you have to come with me and like while I'm doing field work. And so this was like a super magical trip out where he was out with me in Cameroon doing field work. And yeah, and also my students in Cameroon and my colleagues there and the villagers that I work with refer to him as Dr. Papa. This is a picture of the evolutionary quantitative genomics class that you and Joe teach, which has also been one of the joys of his, the last couple of years is teaching these classes up at Friday Harbor. I just wanted to make a shout out because I know Dave and Marvelly weren't able to be here, but that they were also sort of a constant presence through my childhood, and I know all of your careers. Cute picture of Dad and Lynn. And then coming back to the herpetologist at heart, he still continues, like this is what he does when the grandkids come to visit. He's out there just the way his grandpa Jess was with him. He's put boards out in that lower 5 field. And he goes out with them and turns boards and checks on the tadpoles. And yep. Just in case you're worried that, like, with retirement that he's going to give up the herps, it's never going to happen. As we drove out here, he was like, we were carefully scanning the driveway for newts to make sure we didn't run over any. So anyway, just the last couple of things I just wanted to say. So I consider some of my, the things that I love best about my own personality are ones that I got from my dad. We have had many arguments over the years of whether they're nature or nurture, but I've had the pleasure of having both from him. But so for the things that I wish to thank you for, Dad, one is an incredible capacity for sleep and love of sleep. I often refer to sleep as my religion. But the other part of my religion, when people ask me about my philosophy and worldview, I say, well, I was raised by evolutionary biologists, and so I definitely have this sort of statistical view of the way things go in life. But coupled with a deep appreciation for it's not just genetics, it's also, I actually work on how the environment, including the social environment, impacts people's health. And so I've sort of taken up the opposite side, but a deep appreciation for people as human beings, what I call a constitutional inability to hold a grudge. I feel like I get that from you. And certainly an oppressively positive outlook on life. Those are all things that I cherish and love and thank you for.